guys, my name's Amelia Hernandez, and today I wanted to talk about how internal family systems therapy is a useful alternative when regular counseling doesn't work well. It helps people find peace within themselves by bringing together all the parts of their minds, leading to emotional and personal growth. And today I have a very special guest I invited to discuss it with. She has been my personal counselor and actually started me on my journey to finding peace within myself by letting all my parts understand how IFS works. So thank you, Staci Delaney, for joining me in this discussion.
Amelia, it's so good to see you.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be a part of this.
Yeah, awesome. Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for what you've done for me. When I came into your office, I felt this immediate trust and connection, just like you'd been a best friend for years, and you were so incredibly open to listening. I never felt judged, and how you did make such a strong connection so quickly, I'm curious about. And is this something that you want in a counselor when you go find one?
Sure, good question, and thank you so much for validating what I was trying to do with you from the get-go. Yes, I feel like that's really important in the beginning stages of creating what we call a therapeutic relationship. It's very different from the different relationships we have in our lives, but this therapeutic alliance or relationship where there's nothing but unconditional positive regard and to the point that you had made earlier in our private discussions of just being curious. Coming in and just meeting a client where they're at so that there's a sense of safety that's established from the very beginning, but then one allows a client to feel vulnerable enough to, discuss their story with a therapist who in the beginning is a stranger, but then over time learning how to do that with another person, the therapist, but then being able to do it to themselves internally. So it's a whole modeling thing that I was trying to do for you or clients in general. And when they pick that up, then they have the courage to then go internally and not be judgmental to themselves.
Wow. And gosh, then they take that out into the world and put that into their own relationships. That's awesome. Okay, well, I did want to distinguish the difference between an IFS therapist and an IFS informed therapist. Just so any listeners who want to know the difference, will know what it is and how big of a difference it makes.
For sure. Yep. So I would be considered an IFS informed therapist, which means I have gone through little trainings here and there. And I don't mean to downplay it by calling them little trainings, but just more kind of like basic and just informational type trainings. When you become an IFS, what was the term? Counselor, certified, sorry. What happens is there's more extensive training that goes into it. So I believe it's a 2 or 3 weekend training that goes into more extensive work for the therapist. So the therapist has greater access to their self, so that when they're in therapy sessions with clients, self is very much the sole entity, if we will call it, in the relationship room or in the therapy session. So that again, there's no, if I was the therapist, none of my biases, none of my protectors coming in and, long shots saying that they become judgmental towards a client's experience, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of emphasis on the therapist turning inward and really accessing and enhancing their sense of self.
Wow. And there's only one place to go get this training, the IFS Institute?
I believe there's multiple, but I would, for me, I would definitely do it through Richard Schwartz, the creator and founder of all of this. Additionally, with how time consuming it is as well, there is an extensive cost to it as well. I believe it's $5,000. And since there's such a high demand for therapists wanting to, take on this new modality, it's not new, it's like 30 years old, there is a lottery. So you have to be picked out of a number of therapists that are wanting this.
So you guys do have an IFS counselor that you're close with, Haley Tolman, I believe?
Correct.
And so she was the one to tell me about this IFS Institute. So she actually had to win a spot to be able to do that. That's amazing. And wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, moving right along. I wanted to go over what is IFS and its creator, Richard Schwartz. I did find a conference that was held in 2020 that Mr. Schwartz attended through the school databases. I found it. It was a conference on IFS treating addictive behaviors. And in it, he says that IFS is a different paradigm from the diseases model. That 37 years before, he discovered that there were parts of people and they could make people do things they didn't want to do. It almost sounded like multiple personalities to him. So he became very curious and realized that the roles that they were playing, they didn't like to play them. And that you could relate to them differently by listening to them. That the parts were not what they seemed. That they didn't even want to be doing the task or role that they were doing. They were traumatized, literally frozen in time. They had burdens that they carried from taking on extreme beliefs and emotions. And these drove the way that the parts operated. They were kind of inner children. And we're fine with all these inner children parts until trauma comes along, and then they become drivers in the front seat, controlling how we handle it. And the idea is to get these different parts to speak to your true self and listen to what they need, unburden them, give them a better role, and then transport them to their happy place. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to really show people what IFS is?
First of all, I am very impressed with the research that you've done with this, and I just get excited as I'm hearing you speak familiar terms of what this modality encompasses and means. I love, again, the language and the way that you're describing it, because it is like we have an inner city, so to speak, that we all have within us, where there's a number of different moving parts, literally parts and protectors, and how from my understanding from some of these trainings that I've attended, that these parts and protectors aren't necessarily as a result of trauma. They are already innate characteristics that we possess kind of at birth, right? And so to kind of give it that kind of a framework, but then also, explain these other parts of our system called exiles. So exiles are actually a result of our trauma, from my understanding anyway. So I don't want to speak to anything that might counter this, but the exiles are some things that have happened to us in our life and our lived experiences that have created anything from a little T trauma up to a big T trauma, and leave our system feeling less than, or rejected, or not good enough, or failure. So then these protectors rush in, different types of protectors, managers and firefighters, who again we're already born with, but they have been now forced into a role that they don't necessarily enjoy doing, but they're up for the task, and so they do it. To the extent that they overdo it, and then it exhausts and overwhelms the system. And so I think that's so often why we then lead to all these more depressive type symptoms or anxiety related symptoms, and how at times it feels like it's very inescapable. But like you're implying to, when we listen to what our protectors are trying to do for us, because all too often we think, oh, I don't like how angry I'm getting, I don't like when I shut down. There's so many negatives that we're so quick to speak to the ways these protectors show up for us. But if we quiet down and have these characteristics of self, do you remember the characteristics of self?
Connectedness, creativity, calm, curious, I'm not sure if I got all of them. There's a few.
Good. Compassion. Did you say calm? Clarity. Okay. So when we have those characteristics, which again embody the self, then the protectors feel a little bit of trust, and then can be vulnerable in telling their story or the reasons, why they're showing up and how they're protecting the system. And then there can be a little collaboration that goes on. So we're not getting rid of these protectors that sometimes we're like, oh, they're so bothersome, I just wish I didn't have this part of me. Now, with the trust of the self can go, oh no, we still want to integrate you. We want you to go back to your normal, natural role of helping the system function without having to overdo it. So when you speak of these terms of unburdening, that's exactly what we're trying to do there.
Yeah. And if anybody wants more information on this, there is a book that the creator wrote that we both read, and I sure wish we had more time to just sit there and evaluate it. But it's called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. So any information that you guys want, you can definitely get it that way. Last section kind of is moving on to a few facts about, things that are going on, some statistics that might, be important to think about why you might want to come and take some counseling, some IFS counseling. First, I was shocked to find a pilot called Among Survivors of Multiple Childhood Trauma, a pilot effectiveness study. It was done by a guy named Hodgson, and Richard Schwartz was also included in it, a few others. It was published in the Journal of Aggression and Maltreatment and Trauma, and at that time it says that 31 to 59% of patients in counseling with PTSD believe it's like not working, and that PTS found non-response rates as high as 50%. Says therefore a subset of individuals may benefit from alternative approaches to the trauma of traumatic sequelae. Is this something you typically see when no IFS methods are done, that there's a lot of failure in the PTSD or sexual trauma area?
So yeah, I have seen this in a few of my clients that I've worked with over the years, as well as hearing stories from my colleagues. I think what the attempts that have been made in whatever session or therapy sessions with some of these individuals who have experienced this degree of trauma and abuse through a sexual nature is looking through the IFS lens. There's some protectors that don't feel they can just let go of their role, right? So this traditional talk therapy, which there's nothing wrong with traditional talk therapy, because it does work very effectively for some individuals, but for others who have an extensive or intense degree of abuse that they've experienced, their body has literally gone into like a shutdown mode, or on the other extreme, a fight and flight type of response. And so to find a way of calming the system down like that, which means, again, through the IFS lens, getting information from these protectors who are showing up to this degree to protect the system when in reality the threat or the danger has passed. That's in the past, but they're still reliving it in the present. So there needs to be this, through this IFS approach, what I have found is it gives a client the courage and the reassurance to go investigate and explore why the system is so heightened and feels like it needs to continue to keep protecting. So until that, I don't know if I want to call it a wall or a barrier, but I don't believe that's the intention of these protectors, to keep this wall up, but there's an exile that they're protecting and they don't want anything to happen to them. So to find a way of releasing those walls, first and foremost, through, again, this curious, compassionate, connected clarity approach, gives the system a little bit of like, okay, I'll step back, but I can still be here, right? So these protectors don't feel like they're outed entirely. They can kind of still see how this plays out as self gets reintroduced, to be able to kind of break down some of those negative beliefs and then start integrating more positive beliefs.
I see. Oh, so good. Like, I do think that there is a lot of pain going on in this area. Always has been, kind of always will. So this is really important that people know how to come and get some help and know what the difference is with this. It seems I found that in another study, it was a journal of contemporary family therapy, and the International Journal in March 2021. It said integrating internal family systems and solutions, focused brief therapy to treat survivors of sexual trauma. It states that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 70 men experience rape in their lifetime, which really, really shocked me. Further, in 1 year after, 5.6% of women and 5.3% of men reported experiencing sexual trauma other than rape. It's highly likely that many people experience traumatic event in their lifetime, regardless of gender, age, nationality, or socioeconomic status. I mean, that right there, it doesn't matter what your sex is, what your age is, what nationality, what kind of money you make, you are likely to experience this And that's really a huge number. I just wanted to see, is this what you're seeing out in, as a therapist, that you are really getting these kinds of numbers, like 1 in 71 men and 1 in 5 women?
So I can't speak to that percentage per se, but I know within my experience, there are a number of individuals who have exactly what you're describing, who have, if not gone through an actual experience of rape, but some sexual abuse, and correct in what you're kind of finding in with your research as well too, men, women, regardless of age, nationality, background, anything like that. I think there's more numbers than what I'm aware of, because I feel like a lot of my clients are still trying to figure me out as a therapist, right? To see, can I trust sharing that horrible experience in this space? So I do believe the numbers would probably match your findings, but I think there's a lot of clients that don't feel comfortable expressing that quite yet. Similar to how I think statistics out in society is, there's probably a lot more individuals being sexually abused, but the shame and the embarrassment and the fear of retribution, whatever that is, keeps them from expressing it. So I do see, again, from the numbers of people that do kind of express that, and there have been a few clients of mine that have said, I've never said this to anybody. So I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah.
They don't feel comfortable enough to say it, other than maybe in a space that hopefully, again, they feel safe and comfortable enough to be able to share their story, but then also learn and grow from it and not feel trapped.
Wow. I really am so grateful to be doing this with you today. And I wonder, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us at the end here? Something to help inspire others who may, be thinking about starting their journey, but not sure if they can.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Along with IFS, I use a number of different modalities as well too, so I don't want to, diminish the effectiveness of other modalities, and I feel like there's a lot of overlap, but to emphasize how wonderful IFS is and the effects that it has on individuals, I've seen it play out a number of times in the years that I've done counseling. I think it's an amazing modality to exactly what you're kind of discussing. Like, if other approaches haven't necessarily scratched the surface or gotten a client anywhere and they're still kind of feeling stuck, it's just something to invite. Again, the big word I always like to use in my therapy sessions is curiosity. That's all we're doing here. IFS is nothing but trying to explore and uncover and just have a very open and non-judgmental perspective of what our system is trying to do for us and what it is ideally trying to protect. I think it's so important, this core element, and it's not necessarily just IFS centered, because there's other religions that discuss some sort of center or core or being or whatever language works best for them. So it's not a new concept, but I think whether that's societal expectations or pressures or our religious expectations or pressures, there's a tendency for us to deny self. So we hear about our intuition, our gut, those kinds of things. We're almost to some degree conditioned to not listen to that. And that's who knows us best is this self, right? Yeah. And if we can trust it enough to know that it knows how to heal us and we just listen, there can be an amazing chain of events that lead to us listening and trusting ourselves, and then following through with our actions and our words so that we're meeting the needs that we have and that end up making us feel safe. And a lot of times too, what happens is we're able to then release, heal. Healing is an ongoing thing, so it's not healed, but heal these exiles from feeling that they were too much or they had to hide and be quiet. Because when those exiles actually get to return to their natural state, we're more joyful. There's more creativity, there's playfulness, because a lot of these exiles are our younger parts of us. So to be able to have a client tap back into that is amazing, especially when I see it play out in our therapy sessions, but also when I hear it anecdotally when they're outside of sessions and they're like, I felt this. That's when I know that their system is buying into trusting self and seeing what benefits it does have.
Such great information today. I really hope that our listeners feel, kind of motivated or encouraged to at least, look into IFS. if they've never done so. If there's anybody in their lives that might need this kind of assistance, it exists. And, feel free to share this. And, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Staci.
Thank you so much for having me, Amelia. It was great seeing you.
Okay, you too.